Let me send you a letter, young man, about my 8 years of exile on the Isle of Corsica. Welcome, everyone, to another book review, and I've got some Stoicism for you. Yeah. This is Letters from a Stoic by the one, the only Seneca, the younger. This book, why did I want to read it? Well, I quite like Stoicism, and it's actually been a while. I've really only read one of the main works by Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, and then also a little bit of summarizing by Ryan Holiday in a couple of his books. So I went, it's about time I actually read one of the actual main sources, one of the greats. So Seneca was a statesman, a philosopher, a advocate, man of letters, and was born in Cordoba, Spain, around 4 BC. So he was, I don't think I'll explain too much about him. Essentially lived a very, almost glamorous life leading up to being an advisor for two of the Roman emperors, Caligula and Nero, I believe. But also had tough times. He was exiled for 8 years on the island of Corsica. And he lived to the age of roughly about 68 or 69, I believe. And these were a bunch of letters written by him to his friend Lucilius. And so this book is the Penguin Classic Robin Campbell translated edition. So that's actually important to notice because one, there's 124 letters, and this book only contains 40 of them. So he was a bit selective with which ones he chose and which ones he didn't. And it also depends on the translation. I've talked about this before, but the way someone translates something can actually be quite difficult. And he actually mentions in this, you probably need translations roughly every 50 years or so, because the words, the timing, the language changes, even just in English, that something that was written, let's say in 1950, I probably would read now and go, oh, that doesn't sound too, doesn't flow super smoothly. They use words which are outdated and which don't have the same context, the same meaning. So it's quite interesting that exists, that language can change so much. But onto the book. So the book is, I guess, this collection of his letters, and they're, I would say, moralizing, talking about his own philosophy on how to live a good life, mental pitfalls, illness, death, vices, but also some of the lighter things on how to live with pleasure, how one should view friendship, society in general, and serenity, peace. So these letters usually range from 5 or 6 pages to some of the longer ones being 12-ish pages. And they're written in a style where they were made to be published as well. So it's important to keep that in mind. The general themes, though, well, philosophy. So he talks a lot about philosophy, and not particularly Stoic philosophy, but he was a Stoic. So it sort of translates as being Stoic philosophy. But he calls it, or insinuates that it's the most vital pursuit. And also, is it an imperative? Is this the most important thing that one can do in one's life? So he, I guess, argued that everything should be viewed through its lens. So no matter what sort of person you are, no matter how your position in life, philosophy is the key to living a good life and behaving in a manner which is I guess, best for everyone. He doesn't put it in that particular terms, but there is this sort of general undertone that if you are a Stoic, if you're a philosopher and a Stoic philosopher at that, you will be able to live the best life possible. And he argues that it must be a devotion. So everything should be viewed through its lens. You can't be a weekend philosopher, just going about your normal 9 to 5 and doing whatever, your work job during the week, and then on the weekend behave as if you have read the works, as if you are tackling the deeper issues. No, he sort of argues this needs to be a constant thing, and your family life should be viewed through philosophy. Your actions, how you treat the random store clerk, should be viewed through a philosophical aspect. So he's very insistent on that, and he's quite dismissive of I guess, the other ways that people would normally live. So, gaining knowledge through liberal studies, he's very dismissive of. The making of money, also very dismissive of. So that sort of comes across in his work. So if you're not particularly into philosophy, you're probably going to feel a bit taken aback, because he is very insistent that philosophy is what you need to be focusing upon. He's got there was a particular quote in letter 53 And in this particular book, I believe it was on page 108 or 103. Can't even read my own writing. And he talks about what philosophy is for. So I'll read this out in a second. Yeah, 103. So he's talking about, here we go. So what is philosophy for, or what can it do? So philosophy's power to blunt all the blows of circumstance is beyond belief. Never a missile lodges in her. She has strong, impenetrable defenses. Some blows she breaks the force of, parrying them with the slack of her gown, as if they were trivial. Others she flings off and hurls back at the sender. So in that, he's sort of saying, this is the main purpose. Life is tough, and philosophy is a way of moving through the hurdles or the blows that life will deal with you, will send your way, and you have a way of dealing with this, whether this be the slacking off of the gown and moving things, or taking it full force and on the front. I suppose philosophy is the mental way of partitioning the different problems you'll have in life and sorting with them correctly. The second theme that I got from it is the living of a good life. So this should be the outcome of philosophy. And there seems to be an equal measure of not doing the bad things and doing the good things. And it just depends on your personal aspect of which you emphasize. I think he was pretty even-handed in this, where he's talking about, some of the vices that people have, some of the mental ways that you can ignore even your own good advice or those of your loved ones or counselors, but also these things definitely are good and you should do these things, these are more related to the sort of health aspects, such as taking strolls through nature, eating correctly, not overgorging. So that's where it's like, maybe don't overgorge, but also eat healthily at the same time, because you can take it to either extreme. So he emphasizes, I suppose, a pretty even mixture of the two. Other people, Jordan Peterson, for example, I'd say is almost like a modern day philosopher. He emphasizes more of the not doing the bad things. So at least, because it's hard to know what is good, but we all sort of agree, okay, this is bad. So just, if you got to start somewhere, don't do the bad things. So just depends on your personal preference. I like the pretty even-handed nature of this, but also can understand people like Jordan Peterson when they say, life is tough, and if you're starting out and not really sure, you don't have enough information, start with the things which are pretty obvious to most of us. So my personal observations, what I like about Stoicism is there's no overarching theme. I feel it's very hard to read a Stoic book, and like I've only read a couple, so I'm not super well versed in this area, but out of them, I've never come away thinking you have to follow this particular one core precept which cannot change. It does seem that they do emphasize the I don't know, plurality, the paradox of life, where some things are good in some situations, and then other situations that same advice or the same actions would actually be detrimental and not a good thing to do. So it's sort of almost like small snippets leading to a maxim, which is what Juan and I have talked about. Juan has his maxims where he'll take different, I suppose, information sources, pieces of wisdom, and then sort of try and collate them into what he would describe as a maxim, something which is a bit more rock solid than just, say, the fleeting advice of a friend or whatnot. And I think that's actually potentially the best thing about Stoic philosophy. It's not super written hard down, this is what you have to do. It's more the process of developing a philosophy. That's what I really like about it. You can take different aspects from it here and there, and you can create your own philosophy. It's sort of what Nietzsche was saying with his Überman, I guess, philosophical aspect. Once you lose, if the masses have lost Christianity or that overarching theme that binds us all together, you need to be able to create your own. And I think this Stoic philosophy does a good job of that, because it's not super insistent on you have to believe this. You don't have to believe in like they do have some pretty far out there ideas if you're talking about nowadays what we talk about. So they have some ideas related to the soul and to, I guess, like almost rebirth in a sense. But you don't have to particularly believe that. And if someone says, oh, I'm a Stoic, you don't immediately assume, oh, so you believe all these X things about the soul. I like that. I like that a lot. Another observation, he does a lot of complaining. For someone who's Stoic, he does a lot of bloody complaining, and about others as well. It's not just about his own life. It's about, the people who gorge, the man who has a hot bath that's so hot it's almost unbearable, and he's talking about all these different people, and he comes across as quite unstoic. Why does he care? There's a time and place for judging people, for sure. I don't think a world where we have no judgment is the best sort of world. But there is also times where it's like, man, you're just beating a dead horse and no one really cares. Why do you care so much is probably a better question. And I feel this is, probably one of the downsides of the book is that a lot of it is him. What I feel is just complaining without any real practical benefit. Maybe it's useful just to put into context of how, I guess, depraved the Romans were getting, and maybe if it was so outlandish, so in your face, a lot of the things he talks about, then maybe it's like, okay, I could sort of understand it. But coming from a historical aspect, you look at it and you go, okay, whatever. So I didn't particularly like that. And it's also slightly artificial. So I mentioned before that he was sending these letters to Lucilius, and what I could gain from it, which was, it's sort of hard to tell because the letters aren't 1 to 124, they're 1 to 40 in this book. So the author has skipped places, and, it's his progression over time, I guess. And I would say that the first letters are a lot more enjoyable in sense of the reading of them. They're a little bit shorter. They pack a bit more punch, and I don't think they're written as much in the form to be published. So one of the things that he actually did and why he wrote these letters was for them to be published. So even though he's sending a letter to his dear friend Lucilius, it's not written in the sense of a letter which should only be read by Lucilius's eyes. It's actually like, here, Lucilius, here's this letter, I'm sending it to you. Can you go publish this, please? Because I'm exiled on this island. So I didn't particularly find it genuine. So it's not that it was wrong or incorrect, or it just lacked that little bit of personal touch, which you'll find in Meditations, for example, by Marcus Aurelius, because he wrote that for himself. Most scholars agree that was never meant to be published. And so you're getting the genuine things that he wrote just for his own eyes. And whereas this one was written more for intended for an audience as well, which puts a different flavor on it. So my summary, it's an easy to read translation in modern language. I really appreciated that. It contains the gems of wisdom, but for me, not as genuine as other works. And you'll notice that more towards the end as well, where I think the later part is they're longer, they contain less advice directly to Lucilius, and they do have the feel of a narration, something to be read out in front of lots of other people. It simultaneously shows the knowledge gained from age, but as well, I would say, is the grumpiness. So that's where I would say his complaining sort of starts to kick in a little bit, and he's talking about the youth and their decadence, or the power and what it does to people. And for me, I just got a little bit over it, to be honest. So I'm giving the book Letters from a Stoic a 6.5 out of 10. Another recommendation from me is Letters 77 and 78 are bang on. I really like those ones. If the book was written in just the style of those two, I would have given it a much higher rating, because those two letters, which dealt with, I believe, sickness and death, were fantastic. So if you only have time to read 2 letters, read those 2, 77 and 78. What's something pragmatic I'm going to take away from the book? I'm actually going to use his style of quoting. So one of the things he does is he'll talk to Lucilius, and then right at the end, he'll say, now, I know you're looking for your gem. So basically, he was saying Lucilius was wanting a quotable thing. And sometimes he'd have his own quotes, and sometimes he would appropriate them from Epictetus a lot of times, for example. And this was something I was a little bit unsure of in my own practical life. Should through our mere mortal moments we use other people's quotes and feel okay to put them on our own sort of platform? I was initially hesitant of that, but nowadays I'm like, well, if it's good enough for Seneca, it's good enough for me. But you have to expand upon it. Just stealing someone's quote and putting it on your page with no explanation, I feel that's kind of wrong. But if you do that and then have some sort of explanation or how that applies to your life or just adding upon it, that's you putting your own personal spin on it. So I feel that's more okay. So that's my pragmatic takeaway. That is my opinion of the book, Letters from a Stoic. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you become more stoic after this and can endure the harshness of life. What would help me enjoy the harshness of life is if you give this video a like, a comment, or a rating if you're listening via the audio version. That's it for today. Chiron the Stoic out.